be the moderator of this panel here today. And I'll introduce our guests and then turn it over mostly to them. And we are, I know there's at least a couple people in the audience who are excited about it, looking for having some engagement and to showcase some of the work that's happening in this community by those that aren't on the stage as well for this panel. So I hope to have opportunity for some interactive discussion. Our panelists today, first to my left is Susan Glickman. Named to Florida Trend's inaugural 500 Most Influential Business Leaders, Susan Glickman is the Vice President of Policy and Partnerships for the CLEO Institute. She's consultant to the Florida Clinicians for Climate Action, educating medical professionals on the health harms of a warming climate. She's worked with the Fortune 500 London-based The Climate Group, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Our Children's Trust, and the Union of Concerned Scientists. Susan sits on the board of the Solar and Energy Loan Fund, which provides affordable financing and weatherization for solar for low and moderate income families. She's on the steering committee of the Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative and helped initiate the Tampa Bay Regional Resilience Coalition. Please give it up for Susan Glickman. To her left is Diane Willis. Diane Willis has a master's degree in botany and has worked as a wetland scientist in Florida for over 32 years. She's well versed in botany, ecology, hydrology, climate, and the soils of Florida. In 2010, she joined Gaia's Gardens Book Club's book study group in St. Pete, which I know several people here were in, and became introduced to permaculture. In 2013, she graduated with a permaculture design certificate from Corinne Brennan's Grow Permaculture program. In 2017, she got certified as a rainwater harvesting practitioner from the Watershed Management Group in Arizona. She's focused on applying the rainwater harvesting principles she learned in Arizona to the wet and humid conditions here in Florida. Please give it up for Diane. And last but not least is Ken Benway. So Ken Benway completed his permaculture design certificate in 2000, studying directly under Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton. A 50-year St. Petersburg, Florida resident, he helped facilitate the first permaculture courses in Florida and is credited as one of the early influencers of the modern permaculture movement in St. Petersburg. Ken currently holds a passion for bioregional watershed regeneration, which you're going to love to hear about today. Studying natural patterns has led Ken to incorporate the theme of healing into his more recent talks. He sees that the work that lies before us today is not only in restoring the landscapes itself, but more fundamentally in healing what he likes to call the inner landscape. He believes strongly in the natural law, as above, so below, and sees individual human sovereignty as the essential groundwork needed for co-creation in order for us to become effective stewards of the land. Please welcome Ken Benway. So without further ado, kind of the first question, kind of a broad one to give you a chance to speak. And we'll start with Susan. What are you working on and what are your current priorities and passions?
Wow, that's a long one. So I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you, and thank you for bringing all these awesome people. I'm seeing lots of great familiar faces. So, it's funny, as we were walking, my husband and I just over here, I was thinking about sort of all the pieces to the puzzle, the very big, lots of puzzle pieces for, protecting our environment, right? And you have, it's the Everglades people, or the water people, or the land buying people, or the permaculture people, and you're bringing everybody here today, and it lays the groundwork for really what is the interconnectedness that unfortunately, societally, we don't really pay attention to, don't necessarily appreciate, right? So I've been doing public interest advocacy work my whole life. I used to fight the tobacco companies, and now I fight the oil companies. And when I worked with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, which was at a time before the Food and Drug Administration had the authority to regulate tobacco, if you can imagine, one of our allied groups was the American Lung Association. And their tagline was, "When you can't breathe, nothing else matters." And so that's how I feel today about the work that I do at the CLEO Institute. And I've been allied with CLEO Institute for a long time, but I have just joined the staff. I know many people in the room are nodding. I have been a woman of many hats over all these years, which has really been super instructive, and I think gives you a certain kind of wisdom to understand all these different pieces and how they are interconnected. And so the food systems and water and wetlands, and if we don't get it right, we're in trouble. And that's kind of where we are. And I would say, you asked about my passion and priority. It's really to future generations. And when I look at where we are in the climate, it's unraveling really rapidly, and we're seeing this just in the last few years. So I started working on climate and energy issues 24 years ago, right? And you're paying attention to the parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, and we've seen that grow. Now we're past 420 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And over many years, you don't hear it so much anymore when people would say, I don't believe in climate change. I said, well, you may believe in a particular faith tradition, right? That is the virgin birth, or whatever your faith tradition might be, is a matter of faith. Climate change is parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, and like your height or your weight, you might not like it, but it's a measurement. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the warming ocean temperatures that are absorbing all the heat, and that's causing a lot of this extreme weather, the more intensified hurricanes. I mean, what is that costing us? Costing us in our insurance, costing us in our power bills, costing us with our lives. My own sister and her husband lost their home to Hurricane Ian. It was obviously a very scary storm. At the time, I wasn't sure whether they were victims of storm surge or not. And so everything is integrated, and we need to work together. So what I've really tried to do, in particular now that there is, in this administration, in the Biden administration, significant federal funding coming down. So I've been working, because it's a moment that we have to transition, right? Because once you start to move your fleet of buses to become electric, your chances are you're not going to go backwards. So we're really moving a transition away from a fossil-based fuel system, right, to one that's clean energy and more distributed. So you are in charge of your own power, right? So you can have a virtual power plant on your roof. So we're fighting a system that's, just been kind of lodged in for quite a long time. People also don't realize how long we've understood the problem of burning fossil fuels and what it does to the planet. In 1965, I'm a proud University of Texas at Austin graduate. And in 1965, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, 3 weeks after his inauguration, said this generation is altering the composition of the Earth's atmosphere by burning fossil fuels. So we've known about it even before then, but in anybody's book, when the President of the United States says something, people understand that. So everything we have seen post that time has been a deception campaign fueled by hundreds of millions of dollars year after year after year to confuse people, to confuse the science, and to sow doubt, and even to make people be suspect of science and scientists. So we find ourselves in, I think, a very complicated place, and all of the pieces of this huge web puzzle of that is to protect life on this planet and all our natural systems, is really in jeopardy. And it's more in jeopardy than I think, we've ever seen, because the climate is just going to kind of overwhelm everything else, whether it's food production or, and it's even more impacts the people who are the most vulnerable. Not everybody can pick up and fill their car up with gas and get out of town and go to the Hampton Inn in Ocala or whatever, when a storm is coming. So, we're just kind of upping the game for all these emergencies. So, that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about getting out in front of these problems and doing what we can. And, F. Scott Fitzgerald says, the sign of having first-rate intelligence is when you can hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still function. So one can, for instance, be sort of utterly hopeless about kind of the future and the climate of the planet, at the same time be sort of utterly optimistic that we can together work and make things better. So we have 95% of the solutions we need. We know how to power our lives in clean energy. We could use some advances in aviation fuel and shipping and things, and people, you know, certainly research is going on and people are working on that. But no need to wait. So we need to do everything we can. Let's do the cheap, simple things first, right? So with that, I think I'll just keep passing it on. Is that, I've got it.
Okay. Hello? Okay. So I've been a wetland scientist in Florida for over 30 years, and I've observed a lot of things, and people don't realize that water is a greenhouse gas. It moves thermal energy, and they maybe not consider it enough in the climate planning. On a local level, it certainly matters a lot. So my mother was born and raised here, and she remembers every day during the summer it would rain at 4 o'clock for an hour and stop, and almost every day. And I've analyzed data, and during the 80s, it got more erratic, days without rain and then deluges, and a lot of that was associated with development. It just took off in the 70s, and by the 80s we were starting to see it in our cities. And there's this thing called the urban heat island effect, where pavement reflects heat, not like the vegetation, and it really kind of drives rainfall away. I've watched it time and again. And so my passion is to, on my tour I was talking about how, Diane, hold the mic a little closer. Okay, thank you. I was talking about how over the years, they've just drained all the wetlands and ditched them, and practically every wetland in Florida is ditched. There used to be a shallow, winding, meandering stream called Sweetwater Creek next to this property. Now it's been converted to Sweetwater Canal, which is a deep, deep ditch that just shunts the water away to the bay, carrying all these pollutants. So and this is happening all over the world. So we've been affecting the rain cycles because they're broken, because you're taking away the vegetation, you're putting pavement. So my passion is trying to reverse that, which will help with the climate extremes that we're facing. And so during the rainwater harvesting course that I took, their big thing was, okay, Tucson is in a desert, and but you'd think that water would be precious, rainwater would be precious, but they managed it so stupidly. I'm gonna have to say it was stupid, because there's no drainage. It just, the occasional, 6 events a year with rain would sit in the streets, in the intersections, and just evaporate and never reach the poor floodplain, which was walled off from the rest of the city, and it was starved of water. It used to be a perennial flowing stream. That means most of the time. But then it would be a wash, which means extreme rains come, it would whoosh and gone. So their watershed management group calculated that if they converted 1/3 of the front yards, just the front yards of the homes in this watershed to be rain gardens and to infiltrate the rainwater instead of shunting it off to the street, that they would restore perennial flow to the nearby stream. And after 10 years, it's starting to happen, and after 15 years, it's accelerating. So these kind of things we can do now, and they have a quicker effect than would be on carbon. It needs to be part of the puzzle, that we fix the broken rain cycle. We use wetlands for their full use of storing rainwater, and we plant trees and all that. And I'm familiar with a lot of swamps, in this region, having walked through a lot of them, and I know how to read the vegetation. And some of the stormwater control structures they put them are too low. So You get an extreme rainfall, the swamp doesn't fill to its normal level, it rushes off across the street into the neighborhood, floods it, and then the wetland gets starved of water. This would be a simple thing to fix, and that's another reason I'm staying in the business. I don't want to permit another roadway, let's put it that way. So if you fix the control structures to hold more water in the wetlands, you've done a lot very cheaply to help with flooding issues and help the wetland as well. And most people understand that flooding is an issue, which is why they did this thing, you know, back here and dug this ditch and lined it with concrete. So that's the long answer.
Thank you. All right, where to start? So, the good news is that, well, I'll give you the bad news first. The bad news is we've really messed this place up from one end to the other. No end in sight. The good news is there's a way to fix it. A comprehensive, whole systems approach, and a lot of technology on our side, get the word out, the truth out, not the myth that the current economic system wants to shower us with. You know, basically, okay, it's a little better. So basically we have this scenario, as you illustrated quite accurately, exactly what's going on and what we're gonna do about it. So I did my PDC back in 2000. I mentioned this earlier, and I was driving back to Pinellas County, and as I was driving, just really realized how badly we designed our cities and our towns and so forth. It was just, nothing was circular. Nature, it's all circular, and this was all straight lines, and the byproduct was that it produced a lot of waste. So, you know, I did some permaculture in backyards and so forth, and then finally, small scale. And then I had an opportunity to go to Alabama to work on a farmer project where I had up to 84 farmers. We're trying to get them to move more towards permaculture operations than the old model of chemical fertilizers and all kinds of bad habits like the no crop rotation and so forth. And I had to pick up some maps in a map store in Birmingham, and there was this one that just kind of jumped out at me. And it was a watershed map of Alabama. And in permaculture, we have this thing called, we call it ethics and principles. So we have a foundation that guides us so that we play right. And one of those is earth care, people care, and fair share. And there's 12 principles. Those are the ethics, and there's these 12 principles. And one of those principles is to design from patterns to details. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that there are natural patterns and there are man-made patterns. And you were illustrating really quite, thoroughly exactly what the consequences have been from some of our half measures. For example, this thing, it was a creek at one time, and now it's just a channel for water to get into the bay. So okay, how's that? All right, cool. Sorry about that. Anyway, so as I was walking in the bookstore, and I picked up that map, and I got a copy of it, and it was basically showing the rivers in blue, and then the county boundaries were like half shade gray, and then the watershed boundary was black. And when I realized it's like the pattern of nature is just, why did we not design to this natural pattern called watersheds? So once I saw that distinction, it could never go away. Once I saw that as a designer, that this was the way forward, was watershed, okay, is another name for a watershed is a bioregion. They're synonymous. So what became clear is that, and this is a large scale, right? It varies. Look at the Mississippi River Basin, for example, huge. So it's not something that is going to be real easy to get to the other side. But I think that the best way to describe it, in order for me to really cover this effectively, I just want to give you a little example of some of the design elements, just give a flavor of how this would look, just so you get the gist of it, the essence of it, okay? So the essence of it is we want to follow natural patterns. That geopolitical boundaries, such as state boundaries, country boundaries, do not follow, unless it's an accident, geographical patterns. They are determined by governments, for example, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and design a regenerative planet without their permission, because we're not going to be breaking any laws. In fact, we'll be upholding natural law. So we're going to get in their face in a way that's just full of love and solutions. And so when I heard about this Regen Tampa Bay, I lived here for 40 years. I'm in Gainesville now. It was like, my God, it's a golden opportunity here to really make a difference. What we need are examples of success. There's no reason why the scope of what Laura saw in that vision about, turning these things around and really wanting to clean up the Tampa Bay is going to require us to clean up 7 bioregions that drain into the Tampa Bay area. So that's what got my attention. That's what got me here. We have an opportunity to heal these watersheds and clean up the water as a byproduct of that. In addition to that, for example, so in permaculture we have, this is fundamentals, 5 landscape, well, there's actually 6 total, but
Hold the mic, Jim.
we have zone 1. Zone 1, well, back up here. We have zone 0, which is the built environment. All this stuff, highways, roads, shopping centers, commercial developments, all this stuff. That's zone 1. Zone 2 is a part of the garden you visit every day. Every day you visit it, because that's where your annuals are, and you're making a salad every day. That's close to the house. So your zone 1 you want right near your kitchen door, right? Where it has to do with the position of these design elements in relationship to how you live. So zone 1 is a part of the garden you visit every day. So you have your zone 0 is your house, you visit the garden every day. It's zone 1. Twice a week or so, that's zone 2. 3 is like a food forest, 4 is agroforestry, and zone 5 is native habitat. That's for the wildlife. And in permaculture, we're not anthropocentric, we're a whole systems design science. We look at everybody, all life systems, as being equal. So what do? We make zone 5, wildlife habitat, the #1 priority. #1 priority. And how do we know that we got it right? We know we have it right because indigenous top predators in that environment are in healthy and regenerative populations. So if they're dying off faster than they can replace themselves, that zone 5 is too small, or we probably have a couple of interstate highways going right through the middle of it. So we have to design to protect the food pyramid in zone 5 because that's part of the natural world. We get to use what's left over. Doesn't that change the picture? Right? That we hold that as a value, an ethic and a principle, that we are not going to behave the way we've been behaving for the last, I don't know how many, thousands and thousands of years to get to where we are right now. We have an opportunity to change it. And I think that, this is why I get excited. Because I see, and people here that have been working with permaculture, they see it in reality, working in their yards, working in their community gardens. We're just bringing it up to a higher scale. We're talking about, we had a gentleman up here talking about urban farms, okay? That's exactly what we're talking. So that's an annual, that's a zone 1 garden, right? Where do we want it? Oh, let's see, maybe we should go put it out in the middle of the Okefenokee swamp. No, we want it nearby where people need it. So urban agriculture is a big solution with respect to that. So I'm going to carry it just one little layer further. So we have zones 0 through 5, okay? Now, how do we know that the bioregion is healthy? This is the most important thing. If you walk away from here with anything, remember this. The natural world will tell us if that bioregion is in balance. And it will tell us simply by looking at it and looking at the number. Here's how you can tell you're in trouble. That you have to bring your food in from another bioregion to take care of your own needs. That's where you've crossed the line. Like, for example, I wrote these 10 commandments for watersheds, right? Thou shalt not steal thy neighbor's water. Tell that to the people in Southern California. You know, and what the people of Colorado have to say about that. Right now, real estate prices are dropping like a rock in the Colorado River Basin because there's no water. I wonder why. You know, I went to a vacation to see my daughter in California a few years ago, and I was at one of these state parks in Orange County. And there's a men's room, and I have to go use the men's room. And those faucets, the faucet was, this is water coming from the mountains of Colorado, right? All the way down to this little park in Orange County. And the valve was busted, and water was spilling all over the floor. Everywhere. The valve was busted, right? And I'm looking at this, I'm going like, oh my God, I've got to find a forest ranger or somebody to tell them we got water, potable water. I mean, that's one thing you don't do. You don't flush turds through pipes with potable water. That's stupid. Stupid. Ridiculous. But anyway, I could go on, but that's the highlights anyway. Thanks to let me speak my mind here.
Ken Benway, everybody. So this event is called Regenerate Tampa Bay, and so one of the early questions that had, when we were planning it, I think a lot of the discussion around it was just, we're talking about regeneration and we're in Tampa Bay, and maybe took it a little simple, and then it's, what does it look like to regenerate the Tampa Bay bioregion? How do we look at this scale? And it was really eye-opening for me as I was preparing for this panel and involved in organizing this event. And so, Susan, you were involved with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and there's obviously a lot of, maybe not exactly perfect, but pretty, regional-based stuff around, the watersheds and stuff in this area. Ken, you're talking about the Florida, you're talking about wildlife corridors, and there's the Florida Wildlife Corridor that's, working at a state level and different projects in the region, looking at how do we protect that Zone 5 that you're talking about. And Diane, you've touched on a few different things, but like a lot of it was what can you do in your own front yard with your own rainwater, right? And so there's this question that I'm curious, where should we be kind of putting our resources and attention regionally, and where should we be doing it locally or in communities? Like how do we, come out of this conference with something that feels empowering and not, overly daunting, or if you're talking about wildlife corridors and talking about where you've built highways through them, obviously there's things you can do about it, but that's creating challenges. So how do we, for the people here talking, where should we be acting? What should we be doing?
So let's talk about the region, and it's so interesting just listening to sort of our three different perspectives. The water issue at large, water is probably the biggest sort of crisis we have right this very second, and then the warming planet. So we have climate pollution that's overheating our planet, right? It's causing all kinds of problems, from ice sheets and glaciers to melt. And one of the things people really have a hard time understanding is that what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. So people in Tampa Bay, and it's kind of like I'm still not sure how planes fly, right? They're so heavy, and so it's sort of one of these counterintuitive things. How are these glaciers melting, raising our sea levels in Florida, which it is, and that's part of what's happening. So it's not enough water in some respects, and then too much water in some respects. So about, I think it was 2008 or 9 in Southeast Florida, there was a Southeast Florida Climate Compact that was formed because people in those communities in Broward County and Miami-Dade County were going to Washington, D.C. to seek, significant funding for, all kinds of adaptation measures, particularly in the Broward County area where there's so many canals and talk about not natural systems. There's a lot of that down there. So our senators are telling these leaders, y'all go home and get together because sea rise doesn't stop at the county line, right? So they've been, they were for a decade kind of out ahead getting funding, doing all sorts of analysis and figuring out plans and what they need to be doing to adapt, right, to our warming climate. And so in 2018, when my friend, who is the chair of the Pinellas County Commissioner Janet Long, she became the chair of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. So you've got 33 local governments, and we've had regional planning councils around the state for quite some time. During Governor Rick Scott's administration, he did his very best to sort of get rid of them, starve them, whereas, 20 years ago they'd have 50 people on staff and then now they would have 7, right? So anyway, the Tampa Bay folks got interested and in October of 2018 formed their own regional resilience coalition. And our neighbors to East Central Florida were inspired by that, and within a year, they formed one. I am super proud of that because in the absence of real state leadership, and state leadership has come and gone in Florida, they're doing something. So right now, these the 5 metropolitan statistical areas got $1 million planning grants from the Environmental Protection Agency. Those actually went in on March 1st. And then now they're doing implementation grants from a big pot of money. I have got a potential grant that I'm going to talk to both you guys about, because you all have this expertise in the built environment or wetlands and mangroves and things that I don't. Like I know sort of where we need to head, but I don't have that expertise. So it's great that we're together, but I've got a grant in mind and I need your help on that. So one of the things that Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council just applied for is a planning grant to NOAA for a Tampa Bay Coastal Master Plan. It's kind of shocking that we don't already have that, right? But we don't. And I am an area that I'm particularly interested in and concerned about. The Tampa Bay region is the most vulnerable area to storm surge in the entire world. In 2015, a modeling company works with a lot of the reinsurers. Karen Clark and Company did this analysis, $175 billion in potential losses. The Washington Post did a piece at that time called Tampa Bay's Coming Storm, and it really woke some people up. I mean, we're not anywhere near where we need to be in terms of action, but think about that. So Tampa Bay has a very shallow shelf and a wide expanse of land where at the Sunshine Skyway coming in. So if we get a storm, and I'm, for one, am a believer in the Indian blessing and how the storms have avoided us, so I'm hanging on to that. However, if for some reason the storm comes in the wrong way, you could end up with 10 or 15 feet of storm surge, and it could hit Oldsmar. I mean, there are different places along the way, but it's most likely to hit the eastern shore, where there are communities like Progress Village and Gibsonton, right, and Ruskin, all along that area. And what do you have? Does everyone know where Progress Village is and what Progress Village is? Okay, there you go. So Progress Village is a community that came about when essentially black and brown families were moved out of the way of building the interstate in Tampa that, goes through sort of central Tampa to downtown. And so a lot of black families ended up going to a community called Progress Village, and it is adjacent to Mosaic and big giant Mosaic gyp stacks, right? And then you go a little spitting distance down the road, and what do you have? Tampa Electric, Big Bend Power Station. There are 10 unlined coal ash ponds that come out of Tampa Electric, and they're historic. So think about as if storm surge by itself isn't bad enough, but you got storm surge going into communities that may not realize that these hazards are there, but can you picture 15 feet or 10 feet of storm surge and what that means to these communities? So I'm very excited that we're going to be doing this plan, but we need solutions. We need to be getting out in front of these things. But that is an example of something that's going to happen regionally that no small community can do by themselves, right? So it's sort of the, act locally, right? Think globally and act locally. So we do need to look at different, what kind of natural systems and drainage and all sorts of things that we need to sort out. So we've got to look at these problems, in a bigger regional way. And then the other thing I want to say before I sort of pass the mic on, and I have my colleague here from the CLEO Institute, we're all about action. So the CLEO Institute has a climate speakers network. They have a program for empowering resilient women, which happens primarily in lower income communities. And again, we are teaching people to become advocates for themselves as well, right? We need all these solutions. So we have a program, a climate voter program. So Brittany is gonna pass out some cards so people can sign up so you can get information. So this is, an educational program. They're not gonna tell you who to vote for, but they are gonna tell you what are the issues that you should be paying attention to when you do go cast your vote. So please join us so you can just get information. And we've got to change some minds and some attitudes here, because we cannot continue to go in the direction. And this whole thing, like the food systems, is clearly being driven by profit. So there are industries, the fossil fuel industry, that push gas, right? And it's fun because we're talking about food systems. I always say they want to addict you to fossil gas like high fructose corn syrup and crack cocaine, because once you've got that infrastructure locked in, then you get kind of stuck. It takes a lot, more of a challenge to unravel that. I've been involved in Our Children's Trust, which is the young people suing government, because they institutionalize a fossil-based fuel system, that again, the climate pollution is overheating the planet, and it's causing all kinds of problems, from droughts to wildfires to flooding. And the last thing I'll say is we have already seen a foot of sea rise since the 60s, 70s. There is another foot baked in. I don't care if you turn that CO2 spigot off tomorrow. So the decisions we make now, and that's why we have to come together across our sort of issue silos, and we've got to move dramatically in the opposite direction, or you're looking at 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, right? Because when you build a power plant, it's around for 60 years. These are decisions we make now. The other thing we're not doing, essentially where we are now, allows the polluters to pollute for free while we're all paying for it. You can pay for it with your life, you can pay for it in your insurance bill, you can pay for it in, your power bill, right? We're 75 to 85% reliant on fossil gas now, right? And has everybody's power bill went up? Big time. Right? In fact, Duke Energy just announced they're going to come in for yet another rate increase. Tampa Electric has raised rates 63% in the last 3 years. So that is because they're invested in fossil gas. Biggest utility in the state, and along with Duke Energy, NextEra, own a pipeline. Right? When you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail. And that's what we have going. So there's a pipeline from Alabama to Orlando that's really driving energy policy in Florida, because these folks want a customer for their pipeline. It's just that simple. As I mentioned, having done tobacco policy, right, it's the same thing. Once you get that, nicotine in your system, you're addicted, and that's what they want. They want to addict you to high fructose corn syrup and fossil gas. So anyway, I will pass the microphone, but so much of this has to be managed and approached in a regional way, and then there are local aspects to it. So again, it's daunting, but I'm excited about the opportunities, and once again, we have the solutions we need. What we lack is the political will, so I hope you'll join the CLEO Institute in being climate voters.
Thank you.
I certainly agree with Susan that voting is essential, because the people in charge dictate things. I have an example. So the water management districts are a governmental agency whose mission is to protect the water resources and prevent flooding and ensure public water supply. And as far as sea level rise, I have an example. I knew somebody who worked for them, and when Charlie Crist was governor, he not only said that climate change was real, he instructed the managers to plan for it. And then we got Rick Scott in there, and not only could they not plan for it, they could get fired for even saying it. So voting is key, and not just for the top of the, not just for governor, but all the way down to the city and county line. The counties and the cities know that sea level rise is real. I've done a lot of work for the city of Oldsmar, and they are certainly aware. The whole city is an evacuation zone. And they're starting to do resiliency plans and looking at their infrastructure and what's going to go underwater. So, support them in that. Also, though, at the local level, if everybody focused on, harvesting rainwater and keeping it on your property and not letting it go into the bay at all levels, your yard, but also at the major levels. And the water management districts have been getting into that and doing more of that, those kind of projects on a regional level. So that's where I stand on that.
Can I share one thing just on? You mentioned former Governor Rick Scott, and I mentioned the pipeline. What I forgot to mention is, turns out Governor Rick Scott had an investment in Spectra, the company that built the Sable Trail pipeline. And then when he ran for the U.S. Senate, the reporting requirements were more stringent, and he had to report his wife's investment, who, oh, by the way, has $750,000 investment in NextEra, which is the company that built the pipeline, that he voted for, in addition voting for 2 additional nuclear power plants at Turkey Point for FPL and NextEra that never got built, although they charge people for it. So anyway, I just wanted everyone to understand how these things work and why we have a pipeline that we don't need.
Not to mention an algae problem.
And there's that. And another thing.
And another, and another, and another. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so that first pass was just like throwing the darts. And now I like to just hone in a little bit, because there's this thing called carrying capacity. And that means what does a bioregion, what is the capacity of the bioregion to support human life after Zone 5 is dealt with, right? And that depends. Depends on what dietary choices we make. It depends on your latitude or your longitude. It depends on a lot of variables. But we can, and it has been done, we've done computer-generated studies to determine what the human carrying capacity was, and there's no way to know for sure, obviously. But we can move, what we do know, especially with permaculture as a design foundation to regenerate the planet Earth, what we do know is that what we're doing works. That's a given. It's obvious to anybody who started practicing permaculture in their backyard or in their community or in their neighborhood, whatever. It's obvious that it works. If you're working with nature, you're going to get a yield, and that yield is going to be better than what you got out of Publix or out of Winn-Dixie or whatever. It's going to be a completely different animal. It's not going to come from 3,000 miles away. It's not going to have chemical fertilizers on it, And so one of the things that really excites me is how quickly this event came together and how smoothly. Out of one simple call to pay attention to the water quality in Tampa Bay, that had an impact that caused this event to occur. And with the technology that we have, getting this together and allowing it to occur was much easier than it would have been without that technology. And we haven't even begun to leverage the power of digital technology to be on the good side of the problem instead of the bad side of the problem. So what we need to do is build more examples. We need to work smart. We need to work live our lives. The guideline that I love is Bill Bilodeau brought in the illustration of the permaculture flower, which the correct name for that, by the way, is the permaculture design evolution process. And the flower just really worked out nicely with 7 petals and 7 domains. But that is the roadmap to get us on track. The permaculture flower and the design evolution process, and building community, having meetings like this and gatherings like this. And I urge us to consider, the people in the permaculture community, the importance of organizing at a bioregional scale. I can't emphasize that enough. We got 5 bioregions to deal with. We got a red flag here, so we know what those tributaries are dumping into the bay. We know what they are. We know what the watershed is. We can take a look. So in mapping, we have the software called GIS, for Geographical Information Systems. That's how we draw the design at this scale. And so there's nothing, it's like the perfect time, the perfect storm with the perfect technology, and the opportunity is already here. Look what we have here, just in a very short notice, putting this event together. And I'm really excited to get back to my Swanee River Basin and work on that one, and also the St. John's as well. So the 3 that I'm really focused on, well, 4 now. There's the Tampa Bay area, right? The Withlacoochee River. That's dear to her heart. Look at that. We're going to come knocking. We're going to make it right. And by the way, the Wonderfield Farm is a great, has the potential, for example, to be a great command post, a design, they call it a design center, and an education and design center, so we can operate and get these river basins or bioregions back on track. And then, so the ones I'm focused on right now are this area here, this whole Tampa Bay area, the Withlacoochee, the Swanee, and the St. John's. Those are the ones that I'm focused on. I currently live in Gainesville, and so I'm in the Swanee River Basin watershed, and there's a lot of interest growing. So if we can build if we can build an organization, like for example, we have those little post-its up there about where you fit. You know, basically it's an exercise about where you can fit into the game, right? And I would urge you to consider. I know for me, it's like, what is it that makes me passionate? And what is it that gets me in action? What is it that really makes a difference for me, because I intrinsically love it? I mean, I think with the watershed thing, for me, I grew up in a little valley called Littleville, Massachusetts. It's the middle branch of the Westfield River. It flows into the Connecticut River. That Littleville Dam, where I grew up in the first decade of my life, they basically built it, they bought all the property and put in a reservoir. So that whole valley is gone, but is better, by the way, there are a lot better ways to redirect water than hydrological monsters that sit and choke the flow out of the water going to where it wants to go back to sea. So anyway, I know I get out, I have to give myself permission to go all over the place, because it is a crisis, and just one little sentence or phrase that might have stuck with you, just please, nurture that seed and help me help others in our community to make a huge difference. And it's not like we have a lot of time to waste, and that's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I know, and we got a little bit of a late start, and so we are a little short on time. But I know one of the things that we discussed in advance was the desire, to exactly what you're talking about there, Ken, to recognize that everybody does have a part to play, and there are a lot of things that are taking place. We talked about some of them, but the Tampa Bay Estuary programs have been doing a lot of really beautiful things for a long time, and the CLEO Institute has a role to play and is involved in these different discussions. And there's the wildlife corridors have a role to play. What we wanted to do here in the last few minutes that we have, I know, and Liz will ask you to talk first. We have some people in the audience that are doing work either with land or water wanted to give a little bit of a chance to showcase that quickly and give our panelists a chance to reflect on that as hopefully the start of something or the next step along something of organizing regionally and how we can, we can take all the things that we're doing and bring it together holistically. And so, Melanie, I think you. So turn it over to the audience.
Don't be shy.
What kind of organization method can we use to organize the bioregions? Oh, that's a good one. So,
Microphone.
yeah. Microphone. Okay, here we go. Everybody here? Okay. All right, so I heard a little, politics being brought into the conversation over here, right? And, we think that, just because it's the way it is, it's the way it's always got to be, right? So, but the bioregional approach to regenerative design is built on a self-governing model that requires consensus. And it's called sociocracy. And so part of the permaculture model, design model, is to change the structure of how government works. Because I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I have a lot of voice in what's going on at the federal level. And, certainly not much that I can do about it. But with sociocracy, we can do it locally at our community level. That's really, I think, the best thing I've seen so far is sociocracy. And also the other one too that Joe talks about, pro-social, is a slightly different expression, but it just gives you some tools to be able to work more harmoniously within a community. Did I answer your question okay? All right, thank you.
Other questions or comments or projects to showcase?
Yeah, well, when we resolve the bioregional problem, the natural world will handle the water problem quite nicely. We just got to stop doing the stupid things that interfere with that circle. And that's what permaculture. Yeah, that's what permaculture is all about.
All right, we'll do Brittany as the last question because we're running over on time.
I worry a lot about people who have a sense of hopelessness, especially younger generations. And in fact, you can be a lot younger even than you are, Brittany, and go online and do a little backwards math about all these statistics we see. In 2050 this is going to happen in 2060, and I think that's it can be disempowering. And I know even in my own personal life, when you're sort of feeling low, the most powerful thing you can do is sort of help others. I find that across the board. So whether it's helping the planet, whether it's filling out a climate voter form and getting information and talking to 5 friends, or letting people know that this is a place they can come and buy, produce, right? I mean, not everybody is tuned in. The fact that you guys are all here on a Saturday and have done all the work that you did, Caleb, and thank you for doing that and pulling people together, seriously. I mean, most people are just kind of trying to get through their life or get their kids to Little League or whatever they're doing. And so we need to create systems not only for our food and our water, but just our communal, our community. And we've got to plug in and we've got to help people understand, the basics that are very local, how you get food systems. It's starting to happen. One thing I got involved in, and I've been working, as I mentioned, on this federal funding, just because there is $370 whatever billion coming down and there's some opportunities. And once you start to transition away from fossil fuels, you're not likely to go backwards, right? I was in a debate in Miami last week at Florida International University, and now our state government requires public universities to hold debates of opposing opinions. So I literally was on a panel with the Competitive Enterprise Institute, whose big claim to fame is to get Donald Trump to pull out of the Paris Agreement. And then another panel was the Heartland Institute, very similar, right? And another was the Heritage Foundation. And they want to talk about the notion of free markets. Well, 75% of Florida is covered by investor-owned utilities. And they operate in a business model that is similar to a waiter in a restaurant that gets a guaranteed tip. They want you to spend more money because that's how they make money. They get a guaranteed rate of return on capital expenditures. So in Florida, this is how it sort of translates. Every 5 years, we set conservation goals. Out of 53 utilities around the country, Florida Power and Light, our biggest utilities, 52 out of 53. TECO is 40 and Duke is 47. This is in offering energy efficiency programs. This is practically criminal because that is an equity issue, because affluent people get more efficient every day. So understand, why are we building power plants we don't need? Because that's how they make money. Why aren't we helping people lower their power bills? Because that's how the utilities make money. And not only do they not want to sell less electricity, if they capture all the cost-effective energy efficiency, it makes it harder for them to build those power plants they want to build so they can put a major asset in their rate base every 3 years, so you pay for it. You mentioned in my bio, I'm on the board of the Solar Energy Loan Fund. They are the only green bank in Florida, and there are billions of dollars coming down for green banks for affordable financing. Right? So if you do energy efficiency improvements and get solar and you pay it off and finance it, because the utilities build a power plant, stick it on your bill. That's financing for them, right? But if you can pay for that improvement, my favorite example is our Anheuser-Busch distributor in Pinellas put up 1.5 megawatts of solar on their cold storage facility, and the savings paid for the improvement in 5.15 years. So they get 25 years of free electricity. And that solar project was like 6 or 7 years ago, and solar's way more expensive. And the Biden administration has shifted solar, what we used to call a solar tax credit. It's now an elective pay. It's a buy down. And I'm working on developing sort of a cohort of houses of worship, particularly in marginalized communities. And remember, these dollars, 40% of the benefits are supposed to flow to historically marginalized communities. So it's a 30% buy down. And if it's in a low income area, you get another 10%, right? So now your $100,000 system is now 60. Right? And then you can finance it, whether it's Climate First Bank or the Solar Energy Loan Fund, and then you're paying yourself. And if you can pay that off in 5 or 6 or 7 years, whatever it is, then you're getting free electricity. That is, I'm scared to use the word democracy anymore because our democracy is kind of getting turned around. But that is the democratization of power. That is exactly the opposite of what these investor-owned utilities want. They want to lock you in. They don't want you to have solar on your roof. They want to build a power plant way out in the middle of nowhere, transmission lines. Oh, they make money on that as well, right? Another capital expenditure. And then power it to your house. I mean, how much energy do we lose on the transmission line loss versus having it on your roof, right? So they set up all kinds of barriers and laws, and we are one of only 4 states where the law expressly prohibits anyone other than your government-assigned monopoly utility from selling you electricity. So that's our system. There are, I don't want to say ways around it, but you can get your own solar, you can lease the equipment, and we can talk about that. You might want to join the Solar United Neighbors has an open solar co-op in both Hillsborough and Pinellas, Solar United Neighbors, and they'll give you all the information in the world. So now is the time, if you're going to make, there's a $7,500 federal tax credit, there's a $4,000 tax credit for used electric vehicles. So there's sort of this moment. And it matters who wins. And the last thing I'll mention, because I was debating a guy who was the acting secretary of the Department of Transportation, Donald Trump rolled back. It didn't take, because car manufacturing doesn't change overnight, but he literally rolled back President Obama's energy efficiency standard for cars. And that one move, and this figure comes from the Highway Transportation Safety Agency's report, was going to bring us to 789.11 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. So this is where the policies and making sure that good folks who have good judgment and are in it for the right reasons, which is not to line their pockets, can make decisions like that. Can you imagine it in 20 years? I've never even contemplated what 789.11 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And at that time, the Trump administration was willing to roll back energy efficiency standards. I mean, the car companies weren't even complaining about it. So the only folks are the oil industry. We come back to the same thing. It's where people are making money, whether it's the tobacco industry, the fossil fuel industry, and they want to hook you into their product, and it's really that simple. So we have got to all kind of hold hands across all these, different related, interconnected issues and rise up. So I'm excited to see the Post-it notes, and my question to you is what happens next? So how do we take this terrific event that brings all kinds of people together and sort of add it and build on whatever else is going on and come together?
Thank you. It's a great question. And we've had a lot of discussion leading into that. We are over time, so would ask Diane and Ken if you got just a little, maybe a minute of final thoughts so that we can move to the next panel, and then we will carry the conversation on outside of this platform here. We're good? Okay. Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
There is human time and there is lifetime. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but because Susan spoke, as she did, hi Susan. Hi. Could you give us a 2-minute overview of the opportunity in the city of St. Petersburg for the utility company?
Oh boy.
2 minutes.
Okay. I'll just mention.
I mean, there's a
Yep.
lot of that.
It is very exciting. The City of St. Petersburg's franchise agreement with Duke Energy expires in 2026. So when you have the opportunity to renegotiate your franchise agreement, it's one of the very few moments where you have any leverage at all. And franchise agreements back in the day were necessary because it was all about universal service, right? So the utilities got an area, a franchise, so that they had the wherewithal to get energy power all over the place. Not a problem anymore, right? Like we're in a whole different, time frame. So we need people to engage. The business community to engage. As I mentioned, Duke is 47 out of 53 in offering energy efficiency programs. They just announced Friday a week ago, they're coming in for another rate increase. The rates in the last 3 years have gone up 31%, and they're gonna go up again. And again, they're all over-invested in fossil gas, in part because they own a pipeline, right? Fuel, when you look at your energy bill, is what they call a pass-through. They make a guaranteed rate of return on capital expenditure. Fuel's a pass-through, but they own a pipeline, right? So you're kind of getting the circular economy there. So let's get engaged. We need business people. We need, just everyday citizens to come together. St. Pete has a health, environment, resilience, and sustainability committee. It meets on March 21st. There's a number of us that are starting to meet, Central Florida Jobs for Justice and Sierra Club and a whole bunch of folks. So we need to make some noise. And at the very least, so at the last meeting, Councilmember Brandy Gabbard brought up, along with Richie Floyd, but it was good to see Councilmember Gabbard say we need to look at this. And so I would say in 2024, with where energy is and the lack, because the city, and it brought up at this meeting because they were updating people on the sustainability action plan that they did, I think it was 2018, under the Kreitzman administration. They were getting an update. And so, the chair, Floyd, of that committee was preparing to raise that issue, and then delightfully, Brandy Gabbard put that on the table and said we really need an analysis. So can you imagine, Florida sends $64.5 billion a year out of state each and every year to bring in fossil fuels from somewhere else. Can you imagine how transformational it would be? And I'm using that word because we also have another, quote, transformational project going on with the 86-acre redevelopment in downtown St. Pete. So what an enormous opportunity to look at what would that be for St. Pete to have their own utility, to keep those energy dollars here at home and not sending it to a pipeline in Alabama, which is what we're doing. So a really small group of people can make a lot of money, and everyone else is left holding the bag, right? Our current energy policy in Florida is the equivalent of walking into your bathroom. The sink is overflowing. You lean up and you grab those towels off the rack, right? You mop up the floor. Florida has given out $2.5 billion worth of towels. Right? We are, and you know what, to be honest, we have to adapt to the climate impacts already in the pipeline. And the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is handing out a ton of vulnerability assessment money, and we need that. But you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to turn the faucet off. So it's still going, and we're still adding to this problem. We are overheating our planet with climate pollution. It's that simple. And it's causing water problems and extreme heat and extreme weather and you name it. So that's where we're at. The city of St. Pete, with the help of all of you, with the right kind of spotlight. That is one thing I have learned over 40 plus years of advocacy. You have got to shine a light on that. Because otherwise, quiet things are going on behind the scenes. God knows, right? The kind of, campaign contributions and the like that go on. So there is a great opportunity to do that in St. Pete. So thank you for bringing that up, Sharon Joy.
All right. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you.